Hi, this is Sandra Mucha, painter of Playful Perspectives. Welcome to my art studio. Today's tutorial, we are painting a perched blue jay with a nest here, and I'm working with an 8x8 square panel, but you can totally continue this with an 8x10. I've got my bookmark for testing out my brushes. I do have a wash brush at the ready today, and then a smaller brush, and even smaller if you happen to have, works great for these finer details we'll be working on with our branch. Here's my watercolor study you're seeing, and how we do those delicate lines works great to have that thinner brush. All right, let's get started. And put that away. So for starters, I'm going to work with my larger wash brush. On my palette today I have titanium white, my phthalo blue, or ultramarine blue will work fine too, just fine. And then I'm working with my black and my burnt umber. Okay, so I'm going to take my phthalo blue and add some water to that to make a thin wash. Test it out on your bookmark. So see, it's just kind of like a watercolor effect we're going for. But you're going to use this blue over the body of your bird. Just kind of fill that in, and I'm not filling in where I see whites, just as a reminder. I can make my bird much larger to see what we're working with. Okay, and this blue also can go in at the top of his head. Just kind of dotting it in. This is our first layer of blue. We're going to add more layers, but continuing with his feathers, we can again reserve those areas that are white. Just skip over them. And if you accidentally go over those, we can totally bring those back with white acrylics. That's the beauty of acrylic. So easy to edit. Okay, now I can continue with this wash on the bottom part of my bird, his tail feathers, where the wings meet. Can blot my brush if it's getting too juicy in areas, and I can absorb with my dry brush. Just blotting my brush on my rag, and then allows me to catch if there's areas that are puddling on me. Okay, so this wash, I'm going to continue on my tail feathers. Just take that all the way to the end. All right, and now we can use that same blue and touch up the top a little bit if you're needing. Okay, next step, I'm going to work on letting that dry for now, and I can, let's see, I see just a little bit more blue I want to put in here to break up these white feathers. Just double checking. That ought to do it. Okay, so now we can move on to, let's let that dry. You can use a blow dryer to dry it, but we have plenty of other things we can work on. So I'm going to take some of my burnt umber and a little bit of water. And just making sure I have a nice light wash again. And I can just take the edge or use my smaller brush and just kind of let that fade into the branch. Again, that was putting the color at the bottom. and then allowing it to kind of round out around the branch, or you can dot it along that edge. If I dry my brush, allows me to blend it into that white, blot that brush, and then you can blot those edges to let that soften, showing some of that branch still. I don't want to make my branches really dark. I just want it to be a nice accent. We're going to make our bird even more brilliant. And I can dot some of this brown in on my nest. Reserve the white of those eggs. We'll add a blue color. But I'm just letting those twigs jet out here and there. Take a little water if they got too long, and I can easily blot that up with a paper towel while it's still wet. Okay. All right, so next I'm going to move on to my other branches. Working still with the bottom. Can do that over here at the V's. Take my dry brush and blend that back into the branch or the trunk down here and just dot it to create some more bark effect. Just soften that edge. Don't get ahead of me. I'm going to show you how to do these branches at the very tip here. I'm going to add even more water. Test it out on my bookmark, or if you have an even tinier brush, you can switch to that brush. I recommend you practice on your bookmark a few times. Notice how I'm holding my brush almost at the very end, and this is giving me these lovely, wispy, delicate branches fading into the distance, just hinting, or some of these that are close. We can get that situated. Just going over my pencil marks. Love this effect of the soft tree in the distance, and we'll make our bird much more brilliant in a second. Stay with me. Just resolving some of that. Okay. Now we can switch back to working on our blues, and we can see how his head is like a gradient from dark to light blue. So we can use, got my phthalo blue on palette. If I add just a touch of red to that, that's going to give me a purple. And test that out on my bookmark, see what I have. Just a little bit more red. Touch of white. Gives me that lighter purple I'm looking for. Okay, and even more white. Just rolling that off my brush. Yeah, if I roll it, it gives me more of a point, and then I can test it out. Okay, so now we can come in and feather in this lighter blue. And I can use a second brush to help soften that edge to let that fade into that other blue. Let me show you how I did that. I'll do that again. Just above the eye, kind of dotting it, and then fade. He has kind of this blue between his eyes. You can Soften with my other brush. I wipe that excess paint on my dry brush to have it ready. And now I can switch to adding this blue behind his head. Just kind of dotting that in. And again, I can use my dry brush to soften that edge, or a touch of water to help blend those edges. Okay. And now I'm going to use more of this blue. We have kind of in the middle here, this bigger feather region. And we can fade that upward. I did like a U shape. And we can do on the side. And just kind of feather that upward so that fades into that lighter blue. I'm just sweeping it in, letting it work its magic. Want a little bit of those light blues showing through. Okay. And take that on the side a little bit. And this bluish purple can be also on the tail feathers. Let's see. Depending on the light of the day, my studio lighting changes, and sometimes I have to adjust the tint of the color. It's showing more like blue on screen here, but let's go ahead and adjust that some. Okay, and we're looking at giving our brush a rinse, and I can now work with my phthalo blue with a little bit of white. Makes a beautiful sky blue, but this blue we can use on these other feathers. Don't worry about the black bars. We can add those in a second. I mean, even if you're wanting to do the whole feather, and then we can come in and touch up with the black accents, or you can go over those. Skip over them. Okay. Those are just kind of tucked underneath. And then I'm going to use that same blue on the tail feathers here. Okay. Making sure we have all of our shapes situated. And this purple needs to continue down a little bit more. And we can use this light blue mixture on the top of his forehead. And the side of his head, just kind of dot that in. Use our other brush to help blend that some. Okay, so we have our underpainting of all of our blues. And while we have that blue on the brush, that light blue is perfect for our little eggs. I just have 2 eggs in there. Maybe 3. All right. And I'm going to, I'll come in with more browns around those to give them more shape. But for now, just to have some blue in the center of your basket's all you need. And let's blot that. All right, so next step, we're going to work with a gray. And my gray is my burnt umber and blue. Or you can take black and add more white to it. And then this gray I can dot in around his eye. And this works great too for his beak. And the side of his wings a little bit. Go ahead and add some water to that gray so you have more line control. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So I've thinned down my gray and now testing it on my bookmark. That's a much prettier line. So I can start at the top and lift, top and lift. Nice delicate wings on the side is all we need. Okay. All right, and we have one that's below the big tail feather as well, a little gray line down the side. Okay. And now we can kick into our black accents. I'm using my tinier brush. And for that eye, if you're needing to practice on your bookmark first, but start with an area that definitely has a lot of black until you get used to working it even tinier, or fill in those larger areas, and then once you have barely any paint left on your brush, that's a good time to do these tinier touches. A tiny touch just past his eye. Okay. And while I have the black on my, I can add some of these bars on his wings. They're kind of slanted on the left side. And then we'll slant towards the right side. And then on his tail feather, there's a little bit of a hint of shadows. I'm just kind of sculpting that out some. My brush has a great line on it to add these accents to his face. I've got a line down the middle of his beak and underneath as well. Okay, and we can continue with these black bars down the middle tail feather for starters. And then we can add, I've got a little bit of water there. I can just use my blow dryer. And now I can come in, and I'm not going to make these lines on the same line. I'm going to go between, works best, between my first black bars, and do that to the other side, kind of angle it a little bit. Put some at the very tip. And you can come in with just the line, just a little bit at the top. That's all we need. And a hint, practice on your bookmark first if you need. And I think I'm gonna make his eye look a little bit livelier, make that a little higher. And have that dip down a little more. Just a few touches fading into the back of his head there. Tiny dots under his crest or chin. Just a few subtle black dots here and there to help give these its finishing touches. And I'm going to get all the black off my brush. I'm going to switch to touching up my basket with a little bit more brown. I have just pure burnt umber. I'm dotting that in around my eggs to make them look rounded. I can have a line between the two there. Just the inside of our basket tends to be a little darker, but I'm emphasizing these twigs. And on the outside, the lower left has like a shadow. Practice on your paper, just a few tiny dots, not too many. Just making my eggs look a little bit smaller. There we go. Cradled by the nest. Just taking a tiny touch of black to ground that nest out some there at the left side. And the birds in front of it. And just to finish it off, all we really need is to revisit with our white on these feathers. Just at the tip. And on the left and right side, we have that underside, and along the right side of the tail feather, I'm doing a white. Feel free to pause if I'm going too fast. Okay, I think I'm going to use a little bit of this white to help soften some accents on his head, just kind of dotting it in. A little bit under his chin, a little bit on top of the beak here, just to soften some of those edges. And also I'm going to put a few accents. It's a little too white. I'm going to add a touch of water to it with my white accents, and I can come in and revisit just a few hints of feathers on his back. Any other accents you're seeing or touch-ups? Just softening some of that. Okay. All right. That ought to do it. And this concludes our perched blue jay, nesting blue jay. To see more of my playful perspectives, head on over to sandramucha.com. Happy creating!